Here's what's coming up in episode 206, Brandon Massullo.
Some say it's high EMF, some say it's low EMF, some say it's complex, some say it's variable. There's nothing consistently that says that EMF is what's causing these paranormal experiences. We made it more about finding something in the environment, but I think it's an interaction. We don't want to ever discount the person's role in a ghostly encounter.
4 years ago, you told me that you had never really had a paranormal experience.
No, I knew this question was coming.
Is that still true?
I was like, man, I could lie and say something. I'm going to grab photos of all these great memories that I have. And I was like, why am I lying?
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Brandon Massullo is a clinical therapist, author, and parapsychologist residing in Northeast Ohio. He has graduate degrees in clinical counseling from the University of Toledo and psychological research methods from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, UK. His research at the University of Edinburgh centered on EMFs and ghostly encounters, and he studied within the Kessler Parapsychology Unit at the University of Edinburgh. Brandon has been fascinated by paranormal phenomena for 20 years and has been a participant and featured speaker in numerous paranormal forums and events, including Coast to Coast AM, and the Parapsychological Association's 60th anniversary celebration. His research has been published in both academic journals and magazines. Brandon's first book, The Ghost Studies: New Perspectives of the Origins of Paranormal Experiences, combines the thrill of reading real-life ghostly encounters and the satisfaction of new perspectives and insights into the cause of these thrilling encounters. We talked about the ghost studies the last time Brandon was here at the Big Seance podcast. And by the way, this weirdo pandemic time warp thing had me convinced that it was only 2 years ago, but it was definitely 4 years ago that Brandon was here. And that's craziness. But if you need to go back to listen to that episode, it was episode 113. Anyway, please visit Brandon's website, hauntedtheories.com, for more research into ghosts, apparitions, and all things paranormal. Welcome back, Brandon.
Hey, it's great to be back, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
I am super excited to talk nerdiness again with you. Since your last appearance here, we actually talked at the Haunted America conference in Alton a couple of years ago.
We did. That was an amazing conference. So well organized, well put together, great people. I had so many great people come up with questions and experiences, blew my mind. I would love to go back to the Haunted America conference if they'll have me back.
Oh, yeah.
It was truly an amazing event.
I've really kind of missed it because, it didn't exist for COVID. And then I was not able to go last year. So I really, really need me some Haunted America. And I can't wait to go this summer.
Oh, you're going? I'm not going to be there.
Oh, man. Well, it was really cool because the last time I was there, I think it was the last time, maybe it was, well, the time we saw you, I know Karen A. Dahlman was there as well. And it was so cool because I'm sitting there, in the vendor room and a lot of the speakers and people at the tables. And I'm like, okay, it's me, it's Karen A. Dahlman, and there's Brandon, and then there's like 4 or 5 other people, just like a straight line of people that have all been on the show. And I was like, wow, it's like this a little alumni thing. Woo, it was pride, man.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I suppose we were all kind of just sitting there.
Yeah.
It's so interesting when you sit at a table and you got usually there's 2 people to the left or right of you, and then you just sit next to that person for, I don't know, 8 hours or something like that. And you really get to know people very well. I can't remember who was sitting to the left of me, but I know April Slaughter was to the right of me, and I'd never met her before. And I bought her book, and it was really great, interesting stuff that was in there, things that sort of, I was like, man, I didn't know this stuff even existed. This is amazing. So just a great overall conference. I've been to some ones that are kind of questionable where, you just don't know what you're getting into, or there's not a lot of people there. But this one was so amazing.
And I haven't been to a lot of these, but there's also, I hear, really enormous conferences that don't really have a lot of, I don't know, I guess maybe they're too big. And this one is just the right size to where you feel like if you go for a couple of years, you feel like you remember and you get to know people. And it's not so big that you can't just have conversations with people. Troy is super organized. So it's a really organized conference.
Yeah, amazing. I can't say enough great things about it.
So when I reached out to see if you wanted to come back on the show again, you sent me 3 academic papers that you've co-authored since the last time you were here. You didn't have those papers. And one of them was printed in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
And 2 of the 3 papers have haunted houses in quotes in the abstracts. And you had me at haunted houses. It is, though, a little tough to read through when you're not an academic. So tell us what you've been up to and a little about these papers.
Yeah, sure. It's a great point to bring up. I think sometimes a lot of people are intimidated by academic research. And personally, I was one of those people as well. Before I started really just kind of getting into it, reading it more. It's okay to Google the words. It's actually, I still do it myself sometimes, even when I'm writing the papers. But I really encourage it. If you usually have a question or something you really want answered, you can email the authors of these papers and they really respond. They absolutely do. And I think it's really important, before I get into what I've been doing, is to just go on a website called Google Scholar. It's part of Google, and just type in whatever you're interested in. So haunted houses, hauntings, UFOs, ghosts, apparitions, and you'll come up with a lot of academic research on it. I think there's a lot of people out there that just go, well, science doesn't really pay attention to ghosts or paranormal. And that's absolutely not true. And you know this. I mean, you had Dr. Cooper on not too long ago. You've had a lot of people in parapsychology on your show. So there is a lot of academic research out there. And try not to be intimidated by it. I know I sometimes will go, oh, it's a great night, I'm going to sit down and read an academic paper. That's not how I am either. I'd rather read a book. I just got one from Barnes & Noble about classic ghost stories. So I've been really hammering into that one.
Nice.
It's a nice leather-bound book. Oh, I just like having it, just holding it in my hands. But anyway, I know I went off a bit of a tangent there, but I'll get back to your question. So I've been up to a lot of things. One of the articles that I wrote was in a journal called The Frontiers of Psychology. And I want to go back a second. I didn't write it all. I'm a co-author on it. There was numerous other authors, but it's actually a free journal article. If you just type in things that go bump in the literature, it'll pull it up on the internet and you could read the whole thing. But basically what it did was it went over the last 20 years of research into haunted houses. And this is the paper that I think has been the most widely spread, and it has been the most popular of the 3 that I've co-authored in the last year. So basically, you look at all the academic research on haunted houses in the last 20 years. And what they really did was they took a look at this and they come up with sort of what they call environmental research into haunted houses. And environmental research really looks at these sort of environmental variables that have been part of haunted house research for the past 20 years. And these include lighting levels, air quality, temperature. We've heard of infrasound before, and obviously we've all heard of EMFs. And there's another thing called embedded static cues, which is basically just these physical cues in the environment that may make people think or lead to suggestions that a house is haunted. These could be like mirrors, windows, portraits, rattling pipes, these types of sort of physical cues that are in the environment. And a lot of times people in the last 20 years have, whether you're skeptical or even a paranormal investigator, go, we have to rule out the natural causes, right? So we look at the environmental factors associated with haunted houses. And what they did was they kind of looked at all these, and the numerous authors who were involved in this each had an own separate place that they looked at. And what we really came up with at the end was, and I won't bore you with all the details, was that there's really not an environmental model that explains everything that happens in a haunted environment. So in other words, if you look at EMFs, all the research is kind of inconclusive. Some say it's high EMF, some say it's low EMF, some say it's complex, some say it's variable. There's nothing consistently that says that EMF is what's causing these paranormal experiences. Lighting levels, the same thing. You know, when it comes to infrasound, a lot of research saying, hey, yeah, this is something. And then there's other research that says, well, maybe you're not right. Maybe it isn't. You know, air quality. I've heard a lot of people say one of the common things that was out there a couple of years ago was mold is causing people to hallucinate and causing all kinds of stuff like that. There's not any research indicating that that's even happening. There was a guy in 2015 that was all over the internet because he was going to conduct a research on it, but he never did. So again, that's the front end of it. The back end of it, nothing. There's also this idea that carbon monoxide poisoning is really associated with a lot of hauntings. There's 2 case studies about that, but that's really it. Lighting levels, temperature is erratic. Sometimes there was one event where high temperatures led to paranormal experiences, and another one where there was low temperatures. So kind of you look at all the research in the last 20 some years, and you kind of go, is the environment what's causing people to have haunt type phenomenon or haunted experience or ghostly experiences? And what we really came up with was, no, that's not the case. There's not chiefly an environmental cause to all this. And at the end of that, we kind of go, well, oh, crap. Well, it's not environmental, right? So what could it be? And that's where we really went with some ideas of perhaps it's a mixture of several different things.
Before you go into writing these things, I mean, you have a hypothesis, right? Where did you see it going? Did it go where you thought it would go? Did you think it would end up that way?
Well, with this one, this is sort of a literature review. So in 2001, there was a book came out by James Horan, which is sort of a multidisciplinary perspective on hauntings. So all these people came together. They gave these theories. They gave this idea of where the future of parapsychology and research in the haunted location should go. And really what this paper did was it kind of looked to see if what has been done in the last 20 years. And then is there any conclusive evidence that any of this environmental stuff that we thought in 2001 was happening? And they just took a bunch of studies. I think we ended up looking at about 66 experimental studies and sort of the results of those. And really what it came down to was that it's not chiefly environmental. This is something that in the 2000s is really were something we were looking at going, hey, this is something, you know. If you remember, EMFs were very popular. Infrasound was hugely popular. But now that we look back at it, we go, it's not just environmental. It's actually a mixture of things. It's a mixture of environmental. It's a mixture of perceptual, cultural beliefs, psychological or emotional states. It's sort of a mixture of all these different things that are going on. So basically the phenomena itself, paranormal experiences, is so integrated that it's sort of impossible to summarize its parts. So if you look at your grandma's famous spaghetti recipe, right? The end result is an amazing spaghetti sauce, but there's so many ingredients and everything that goes into that. You know, it's very hard to parcel all those ingredients out or taste everything out of it. And that's the same we're finding with ghostly or haunt type phenomenon. There's so many things involved with it: psychosocial, biological, psychological, environmental. It's the right person in the right settings more than it is EMF messing with my brain and causing me to see ghosts.
I think back to, you're talking about these 2001, early 2000s, some of those early ghost hunters seasons. You heard so much, and I could hear it right now, talking about the fear cage. You go down to the basement and there's a line of electricity that goes this way, and then there's pipes that go this way. And, the way they talked about a fear cage had made you like, oh yeah, this is I would be worried about sitting in the middle of a fear cage. What's going to happen? Am I going to go out of my mind? Is it bad for my brain? Am I going to all of a sudden see a clown car of ghosts drive by and do a drop off? So is the fear cage then maybe not what we thought it was?
I think that when you look at an event, a paranormal experience, an apparition, a sense presence, a disincarnate voice, whatever sort of the haunt type phenomenon something has, there was such a push to figure out, let's find out the cause of this, right? We need to blame this on something. There was a fraction of the paranormal community that just went, it's a ghost. This is Aunt Susie hanging around the house, just waiting to pounce, There was another factor that was basically saying, this is just environmental stuff, EMS messing with your brain. There was another factor that's saying it's a demon, So this idea that there has to be one cause to these events that these people are experiencing, and that's not the case. It's an interaction of different things. And now that's kind of where we're going right now with things. It's actually taking a turn more towards the psychological and the emotional and the cultural, the past beliefs, these things that really define us as a unique human being that we bring everywhere we go. Every place that we enter, every space that we enter is unique to us, right? That's an important part of things. Environmental psychology is basically the study of the transactions and interrelationships between people and their surroundings. I think we believe we're so technologically advanced, we believe that we're not impacted by the environment, the space that we enter, which is not true. If me and you went and visited my high school when we walked in, there would be smells, there would be memories, there would be experiences that I would have that you're just like, it smells like a regular high school to me. But I look to the right and that's where, I slipped and fell and everyone laughed at me. And, this space has a certain impact on me. Devout Catholics who go to the Vatican City, they experience that event differently than an atheist would. Cubs fans walking into Wrigley Stadium have a different experience than walking into Yankee Stadium, right? We bring all this stuff when we enter a location. And I think we kind of thought, well, that's not important in the past. But it is so important. And our beliefs, our religious views, our socioeconomic states, our culture, when we enter a haunted location, the space itself, the atmosphere itself is part of what's happening, as well as our emotions and our stress at that point. That's all part of everything that goes into.
I think that's probably why we experience some of those things, or at least think about those things when it comes to theaters, huge theaters and hospitals and schools. In my mind, there's so many memories, good or bad, connected to schools, hospitals, those things, prisons. That's what it makes me think of when you're talking. And I'm glad you gave those examples because that makes it make more sense to me.
Yeah, it's commonly, and by day I'm a clinical therapist. So, a lot of people say that insane asylums or psychiatric hospitals are so overwhelmed with hauntings and things like that. When you walk into that place, you kind of have that emotion, that feeling of sadness of what happened in that environment, and you think about maybe, going back to the psychiatric asylums from the 40s and 50s and earlier, about sort of the intense torture that people went through. So when you think about that, you can't help but be emotional. You can't help but start feeling sad. You can't help but start empathizing. And that's part of what's happening sometimes in these haunted locations. We bring something to the table, how we're feeling, how we're thinking emotionally, our past, how we view mental health. These are all coming with us in there. That's so important and yet overlooked, I think, in the last 20 years or so. Because we got to get rid of all these variables. Let's not worry about emotion. There's EMFs, there's infrasound, there's just stuff messing with our brains, and it's just cues, and there's humidity and toxic mold, and it's not the individual unique person that's part of the paranormal experience. It's these external things that we can measure with our little gadgets, and then that's not really the case. We tried to make everything so simple and technological, and that's, in my opinion, vastly incorrect.
So speaking of the environment, back in the day when I had a paranormal team and, used to sometimes have people contact me with reports of paranormal activity in their home, or sometimes they'd ask for advice about something going on, or they'd maybe want me to come check things out. And I used to always recommend that people keep a log or a journal when things happen, including details like, who was there, who was not there, the weather, the temperature, activities that were going on at the time, especially if they were heightened, or who witnessed it, stuff like that. And when someone reports paranormal activity in their house, what are the first things that you want to know as a parapsychologist? I mean, without having any specific examples, like what are the questions you ask first?
A lot of times I just ask them to tell me about the experience and tell me about what they thought of the experience. Tell me about a history of paranormal experiences. Have you had these before? Is this something you talked about in your family? How were you feeling that day? What were your emotions about it? How do you view the paranormal? Is this a positive thing? Is this a negative thing? You could really, just by talking to someone about their experience, get just a whole different perspective on what it is. And that's, I know a lot of when people go into homes, they get this information. So that's the first step. And then you get as detailed as you can about the experiences. How often have they happened? Where have they happened? What time of day? What was going on? Who was there? Talk to the other witnesses or people who experienced it. To me, the people are the most fascinating part of an experience. I think, like I mentioned before, in the past, we were just like environment. There's a ghost running around here. There's this discarnate external entity that's floating around. And we took away sort of the emotional or the unique personal experience, and we made it more about finding something in the environment. But I think it's an interaction. It's the right person in the right environment or the right moment. This person is part of the experience. If we ignore that person, we're ignoring 50% of this paranormal or ghostly apparition or haunt type phenomenon that occurred. So we don't want to ever discount the person's role in a ghostly encounter. And these gadgets and these other things and these boxes, these spirit boxes, we're discounting the person, and we're just thinking we're contacting something in the environment. And again, I think that's a grave mistake if you feel like you're truly investigating a location.
I like this, actually. I mean, there are several reasons why I got out of paranormal investigation. And it was just a few years, and, we weren't a big team, and we didn't have a whole bunch of investigations under our belt. But I did feel like we were helping people, and that was the point of that.
Sure.
But what I got burned out on, and also in just the little experiments that I was doing personally in my home, EVP stuff, is I got burned out on all of the science behind it. When I'm not a scientist, I can't pretend to be a scientist. So I'm sitting here worrying about all these variables and trying to, be something that I'm not. And it's so overwhelming. And it's like focusing on the person and the experiences, and going into a haunted location and just sitting there and listening and thinking and feeling. And, a lot of times nothing happens, but sometimes that's more enjoyable than focusing on all the flashy, things that you don't understand anyway. Like you see things flash, but how many investigators can actually explain why something's flashing or what it's doing? And then you miss out on all kinds of stuff. But yeah, connecting with the person, I like that so much better.
Yeah, it's a 50-50 thing. The person is there and the environment is there, and you don't want to ignore the environment, but you also don't want to ignore the person. You don't want to ignore what they're going through or how they view the situation or what was happening. That you just don't want to ignore that. And I think the shows in the past, I don't watch very many nowadays, but in the past, it was all about hear the story, where it's happening, get in there with your tech, and then EVP it up and do all that stuff. And it's not just the shows. I think sometimes even in academia, they were kind of more focused on the environmental things and infrasound and EMF and lighting levels and humidity and all these other things, that they kind of were not focusing so much on the person. Not that it wasn't happening, because it was happening, but it's not just the person. It's not just the environment. It's a mixture of both. Right person, right setting, all these types of things.
I even remember getting the barometer out. Like, oh, what's the pressure? What's the pressure at the moment?
Yeah. And again, that's not bad. I don't, there's nothing wrong taking with, like, if you have a data logger and you get all this information, it's part of figuring things out. But it's not the only thing. I think that with the paper, things that go bump in the literature, it was this idea that it's not just chiefly environmental. It seems like if we look at the research in the past 20 years, it's not just that. There's other aspects that are going into it. It's this interactional, it's bidirectional. It's environment, person, environment. It goes back and forth. There's so many factors that kind of go into an experience. Parceling them out is very challenging. So we have to look at things as a whole. One of my articles is Environmental Gestalt Influences Pertinent to the Study of Haunted Houses. Basically what Gestalt is.
Thank you. Yes.
So first off, we use terms that are horrible and, but basically what Gestalt is, it's this idea that the phenomenon is so integrated that it's impossible to summarize its part. Holistic may be a better way to look at Gestalt than using the word Gestalt. It's a holistic look at what's happening in paranormal experiences. So we're taking into account the psychosocial, the biological, the psychological, and the environment that surrounds us. So that's what we're looking at, the whole person. The environment does play a part, but as you walk into an environment, there's also a lot of things that come along with that. And I think one of the things we looked at with the paper was why are certain people having experiences as opposed to not everyone having experiences? So that's something we kind of looked at as well. And this idea that, you have a person walking into an environment, maybe this person is very environmentally sensitive. Maybe they, are very sensitive to internal and external stimuli. Maybe they have prior paranormal beliefs. Maybe they're in a state of emotional intensity, high stress levels. And then you walk into an environment with a number of these sort of contextual environmental issues going on. The Gestalt influences, like cues in the environment. Those of us who do paranormal investigations will rent a house for like a weekend, and then the house, when you walk into it, it's surrounded, there's like these creepy dolls that are all around you, right? Most people who kind of know what I'm talking about. There was one place I went to over the summer. I walked in and I was, oh my God, there's so many creepy dolls. So overwhelming. I was terrified just of the dolls themselves,
That's a big cue, huh?
Yes, it's a cue. It's one of those embedded static cues. When we go on these paranormal walks, these commercial type things that are out there. So paranormal tourism is something I wrote about a little bit in the last couple of years or so too. But they kind of plant is a wrong word. They utilize these things to kind of get you into the notion of an experience happening. And me personally, if I see one of those creepy porcelain dolls, I will be honest, my heart beats a little faster. So, those things are very terrifying to me. Probably because, I don't know, when I was growing up, I guess Chucky was kind of big.
Yeah.
And didn't that happen in Poltergeist too? Didn't when a clown come out from underneath? Oh my God.
Yes, to me, that was scarier than Chucky.
Yes, exactly.
The clown seemed a little more real than goofy talking Chucky.
Yeah, it was utterly terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of burned into my psyche. So when I see that, I automatically think, oh, shit, something's going down. There's something happening. So I'm a little bit more on alert. And there's actually a lot of research on paranormal tourism out there. These ghost walks and these commercial events and overnight stays. They kind of go over this idea of the little tricks that they use to sort of entice people feeling certain ways. And that gives us a little glimpse into what's going on as well. All these things are factors when it comes to haunted houses and these types of situations.
Does that have anything to do with what one of your papers mentions enchantment? Is that what that is?
Yeah, enchantment is one of those words that I think is, I don't know. It's always around, and no one really knows how to conclusively sort of define it. But enchantment is, the paper I wrote was on enchantment, or co-authored was on enchantment and paranormal tourism. And I think that as we look at paranormal tourism, enchantment is sort of a mixture of sort of positive emotions and negative emotions. And we talk about these sort of things that happen, and so enchantment is something that we encounter. It hits us. To be enchanted is to be struck or shaken by the extraordinary that lives amid the familiar and the everyday. To be simultaneously transfixed in wonder and transported by sense, to be caught up and carried away. Enchantment is marked by this odd combination of somatic events. So it's a mixture of joy, disturbance, fear, happiness, excitement, all these things that kind of go on. And that's a definition from Bennett in one of her books in 2011.
No mention of porcelain dolls.
No mention of porcelain dolls. No. If we think about enchantment, we've all sort of been enchanted, or it's this state of being in awe. So when someone has an experience that doesn't sort of fit into their mold of, day-to-day mundane activities, we sort of sit there in awe or become enchanted by it. And a lot of times paranormal experiences, the first ones we have are these enchanting experiences, these extraordinary experiences, this step away from the mundane of your normal day-to-day lives. And I think that could be addicting. You talk to ghost hunters and paranormal investigators, they're always seeking that sort of, this is maybe a bad correlation, but that high of having that enchanting experience. And paranormal tourism, they kind of set an environment to maybe have something like that happen. But basically what we talk about is there's these levels that happen during enchantment and how that could lead to a paranormal experience. And I want to say this first off, I never discount any sort of genuine ghostly occurrence. Anyone who knows me or has read my books or my book in the past knows that I definitely do believe that there is sort of ghostly phenomenon that happens. But I believe that in order for this stuff to actually happen, there's a complex series of things that occur, psychological, environmental, biological, that sort of all need to line up for a truly paranormal experience to happen. I don't believe that, we're walking around and just running into ghosts, for the most part. Again, there's not a one explanation that explains everything paranormal, but there's all these combination of things that happen externally, internally, that really happen when a paranormal experience happens.
You're listening to the Big Seance podcast with Patrick Keller. Be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
This episode of the Big Seance podcast is brought to you by Jim Harold's Campfire. And if you like stories of the strange, the weird, and the unexplained, well, then you need to check it out. If you're a longtime listener, you likely know that Jim Harold was one of the inspirations for the Big Seance. The very first podcast I ever subscribed to, it was produced by Jim Harold. He's been podcasting since the early days of podcasting. In fact, I think he's the OG paranormal podcaster. And he's approaching the lucky 13th anniversary of his Campfire show. If you haven't listened yet, the concept is pretty simple. Jim just talks to regular peeps about the strange stuff that happens to them for about 90 minutes every week. Ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, and head scratchers. He doesn't exaggerate or play a lot of spooky music. The stories just speak for themselves. One's like a ghost story involving serial killer Ted Bundy. A woman gets caught in what may have been an interdimensional portal that she narrowly escaped. Then there was the story of alien abduction by what may have been a reptilian. Even this morning, I just saw on Facebook that the most recent episode talks about a dishwashing ghost. I can get behind that one. Now, not all of the stories are horrifying. Some are heartwarming, a visit from a past loved one, or even a peaceful near-death experience. Den of Geeks said, Jim Harold's Campfire is perhaps the best tool we have currently in existence to hear real-life scary stories from other human beings since the actual campfire was invented. Well, regardless of the story, they are true and fascinating, as told by ordinary people who've had extraordinary experiences. Jim supports us, so let's all tune in to Jim Harold's Campfire on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to The Big Seance.
Thanks for joining us for the Big Seance podcast. We'd better get back to the table while there's still some candlelight left.
Well, speaking of paranormal tourism, I just found out in the last week I had the opportunity to go to Waverly Hills Sanatorium. And so, first of all, I was curious to know if you'd ever been there. And I wanted to know if you could give me an assignment for when I get there. Like, what do I need to do? What do I pay attention to when I go into that kind of environment?
No, I've actually never been to Waverly Hills. Is that in Southern Ohio?
That's in Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky. Okay. No, I've never been there before, actually. Are you going by yourself, or is this part of a group thing?
I'm going with some friends.
Okay. What would I do? Well, I'll be honest with you. Right now, I'm working on a project with a couple other people, and we're kind of coming up with how would we all sort of, when we walk into a haunted location, what is the thing to do? So it's a multidisciplinary team. It's myself, a physician, molecular biologist, and sort of a computer and electronics specialist. And
so no quacks. Y'all are real.
So we're sitting down and trying to figure out, what do we do when we walk into a haunted location? From my perspective, from the molecular biologist to the computer scientist, electronics guy, to even the physician, how do we approach this type of environment? Because we're all having these different perspectives on what we're looking for. I'm looking for a lot of the things that I talked about earlier. The molecular biologist has a different perspective. The computer and electronics person, he's kind of more interested in what's happening around, what could we measure? The physician has a different sort of take on what's going on as well. So I don't know how to answer that question for you. We have something set up at one of the most haunted locations in the United States in April. So maybe I could touch base with you and after that and kind of come up with my answers for that.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a great question. And everyone you ask that to is going to answer it so differently, from setting up data loggers to interviewing witnesses to researching the heck out of the environment that you're walking into to who knows what else, bring a medium, whatever. And there's so many different perspectives on how people handle a paranormal investigation. And that's not a bad thing. But I think for me, I just want to go, okay, so I got these people, they're different perspectives. Let's walk into a place and let's kind of figure out, how do we do this? And what data are we coming up with? And is this helpful? Are we doing things correctly? Do we mix the psychology with the environmental, with the biological, the physician types? All this, we got to mix this stuff together and give questionnaire. There's so much to go on.
It can be overwhelming, especially when you are visiting a location that is so popular for paranormal experiences. And it's so almost, I would use the word like trampled through, every day, and everybody bringing their paranormal nerd energy and wanting to have experiences. And when you only have a few hours and you've been trying to get to this location, which is also, if you think about it, really weird to want to go to a location like that. It's overwhelming. Like, what do I need to do? I've got 4 hours here. You've got the stories that have been told, on this show or that show, or you've read about it. And it's like, what do I want to focus on having an experience? Do I want to just tune in? Do I bring some gadgets? Do I just enjoy the fun?
I think that's great what you just said there. What is my motivation? Why am I going to this? What do I want to get out of this? And maybe your answer comes from that. For me, my motivation is obviously the things I talked about a little bit before this. What I want to figure out, how do you handle these types of things? But the numerous places I've been before, it's just been about, I just want to be there. Most paranormal experiences usually happen when people aren't expecting them. So it's just conversations amongst two people, or it's just hanging out by yourself in the kitchen. maybe just having a normal sort of daily routine that you do where you're not really thinking about ghosts. These are the times when usually paranormal experiences happen. Sitting in a room with a spirit box that's on a level 10 and no one could hear what the hell is going on. And, usually these aren't paranormal experiences. It's not conducive to things along those lines. So whatever your motivation is, and don't feel guilty about whatever that is, this idea that seeking an experience is somehow a bad thing. I need to be scientific and level-headed and I can't get scared or frightened. I don't know. To me, it's stupid. If a ghost popped up right next to me right now, literally, I would probably jump up and run. You know what I'm saying? So, it's like, that's a normal expected response to something. If you have an encounter, if that's what you're looking for, that's what you're looking for. If you just want to hang out with the space, hang out with the space. For me personally, I would say don't put pressure on yourself. This is a fun time to be around people who are like-minded in an environment that's kind of ripe or conducive for touching the etheric plane, as they say in Ghostbusters, but sort of what's happening in the afterlife. What are we, that's why we're all here. We're trying to figure out the answer to that question. And how we answer that, whether I can prove that to some skeptic is irrelevant. To me personally, if I have an experience, it's a powerful, profound experience that can change the rest of my life. I'm not doing this to prove to some weird guy or girl who is very skeptical of the paranormal that it does exist. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to get enlightened. I'm here to gain knowledge. I'm here to be moved, to be enchanted, to be connected with something. And don't ever feel bad about that.
4 years ago, you told me that you had never really had a paranormal experience.
No, I knew this question was coming.
Is that still true?
Well, I just finished a book and I stepped outside my comfort zone with this book, but I did a book about haunted locations locally here in Medina, Ohio. And I was really excited about this because I went out and I went to all these haunted locations in the city I live in. And I spoke with numerous people, business owners who've had paranormal experiences, and so eye-opening, super eye-opening. I gained so much from this. Stories. And I'll get to my point here. Because I'm always hesitant to talk about my own personal experiences because I feel like it's not really, everyone has sort of their own origin stories. And, I kind of, no one wants to hear about boring Brandon. But
oh, come on, hit us with it.
So, throughout my life, I've really been studying the paranormal since high school, actually. So we're looking at 20 some years. And I literally traveled the world. I went to Edinburgh. I studied parapsychology. I went to the most haunted location in Scotland, which is Mary King's Close. I spent 5 days there alone, not all day, but alone in Mary King's Close, surrounded by what people have described as numerous paranormal infestation. And I had zero experiences. Numerous haunted locations, very popular throughout Ohio and the country. Nothing. I went 5 minutes down the road to a place locally here that's now a historical society, but it used to be it's a home, I think, from the late 1800s. And I was in the basement taking photos because that's for the book. That's what I was doing. And lo and behold, I'm just sitting there taking photos. And in my right ear, I hear something along the lines of hello. And not only did I hear it, but it was tactile as well. So I felt it. When someone whispers really close to your ear, you could feel their breath.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's like, hello. And it was like right in the corner of my ears. And I was just like, man, been avoiding this experience because now I have to talk about it. Now I have to sort of figure out what it was. And
all up in your grill, man. You can
all up in my grill and just right in my ear, blowing in my ear. And I stopped. There was parts of my brain that was just going a million miles an hour. What is this? What could this be? Am I misinterpreting this?
Right.
And then there's that fear. It's that enchantment that I talk about. It's this awe, this excitement, this, oh my gosh, this is an experience. And then there's the other side of that, which is fear. Am I safe? What the heck is going on? the tingling, the goosebumps, this enchantment, this mixture of positive emotions and negative emotions. And I'm in a basement by myself. And this is a creepy basement too, by the way. So all these things are really coming into play here. And my brain just doesn't know what to do. And that's a lot of the things I talked about with enchantment, the role of enchantment, the role of these other things that kind of come into this. It all goes through your brain. But honestly, when you have an experience, you're just sort of sitting with it. And I know that's not as cool as a lot of people's stories or ghosts are jumping out in their face or anything like that. But, for me, I there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about that.
Do you, because I've been there where you have an experience like that. That's not like knock you over the head, but it's an experience. And then a day later, you're like, oh my God, why didn't I respond? Or why didn't I say something? That's literally somebody saying hello to you. Or, I always tell the story of me one night. I was blogging. This was before I started the podcast. And I had worked 2 days on this blog post about EVP and how to set up EVP experiments and all that stuff, and really wanting to reach out to the other side. I'm literally like typing things out like that in the blog post. And I had a cabinet at that time. This is in another house. I had a cabinet at that time that had all of my gadgets and tools and recorders and detectors and spirit box and stuff like that in that cabinet, 2-door cabinet, latched, right? And I'm sitting there and it's late at night, and all of a sudden I hear clink, and I look over and the cabinet opens up. Like, one of the doors opens up to the cabinet, and I look over there and I'm like, and my OCD brain is like, oh, neat. Oh, well, now I have to finish this blog post. So I go back to like, I got to crank out this blog post. And I go to bed later and I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been wanting it to happen forever. And I could have just busted out a tool or started talking. I mean, if that was not a invitation, I don't know what that was. But
that's odd. It's almost like you had a defense mechanism to just kicked in and just was like, that's nothing. Don't worry about it. Keep going back to
and I know that, because I know me and listeners know me, it's, my 50% skeptic brain was probably going, don't even think about it. Like, why would that?
Isn't that amazing though? Part of us just wants to discount something right off the bat.
Oh yeah.
That's nothing. Because if I accept that as something, my world changes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I
get an additional chapter in your book immediately, right there.
That's right. Well, it's super interesting because I'm a big fan of Ghostbusters, and I know people can't see, but I have a proton pack behind me. But you have these 3 parapsychologists who devote their life to ghosts, Ray Stantz and all. So if we think about the first scene in Ghostbusters when they see the library ghost.
That's what your story reminded me of, by the way.
Yeah, but it's like I spent all this time on researching and I got all these tools and gadgets, and then they walk up and they see the ghost and they're like, what do we do now? It's like, what? And then I think Egon pulls out the calculator. He's like, stop that. It's like, someone's got to talk. We reach that point and we have an experience and our brain just goes, oh, what do we do? My brain shut down. It was kind of thinking of, my brain more went, what is happening? Not so much, should I communicate? I think maybe a minute or two later, because I did stay in the basement and take pictures. I kind of said something along the lines of, I would love to hear that. I would love for you to talk to me again.
Were the rest of your pictures kind of shaky?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I honestly, you kind of look back at that and I can remember bits and pieces, but not the whole thing. You think it would be burned into my brain. But I remember what I was looking at and I can almost draw a picture of what I was seeing when it happened, but maybe the 30 seconds after or a minute after, I don't recall the specifics of where I did and what I went. It's kind of blurry-ish.
Dude, I am so happy for you. Can I just tell you, I'm jealous and happy for you all at the same time. I mean, that's awesome. So did that go into the book, or was the book done when you had that experience?
No, that's in the book. I know There's a lot of books on local stuff. It's called Haunted Medina County, Ohio, and that'll be out, and hopefully it'll be out around October. If there's anyone in Medina, Ohio listening,
I wouldn't think you would have to be in Medina to enjoy that.
That's a good point. Yeah, but that's in the book. And, part of me, I've always been the research part of it, looking at the articles, writing all that crap. So taking a step outside that and just writing about local ghostly lore was just something different that I really wanted to do. And I actually enjoyed that, just interviewing people and talking to people and visiting locations and taking photos and just listening to people's experiences. I actually kind of prefer that more than sort of the academic-y type things that I usually write or put out there.
Yeah. One more question, I think, before we close up shop, and that would be, what is your most treasured possession?
So let's say if my wife and my dog are not in my house and I need to go back and grab something because it's on fire or something, what would I grab, right? That's kind of what my brain goes towards.
Yep.
What's the most important thing? To be honest with you, and this sounds really horrible, but I think I would grab, I made a proton pack when I was in grad school, and I honestly think I would grab that.
Do you know that is what I assumed you would say? Actually, before I even, because you've mentioned it twice, you've mentioned it with me before. You mentioned it in your last interview. I was like,
did I really? Oh my God.
I bet he's going to grab that proton pack.
Jesus. It's one of those. That's terrifying.
Dude, there's a lot of energy in that proton pack, man.
Well, I kind of I was like, man, I could lie and say something. Oh, I'm going to grab photos of all these great memories that I have. And I was like, why am I lying?
Don't lie. You had that proton pack with you in the basement of that historical society, didn't you?
Yeah, I actually don't leave the house without it. But it's to me, I put a lot of time and effort because I didn't build it from scratch. I'm going to age myself.
That's okay. We are the same age, by the way.
Oh, okay. Back in 2001 to 2004, you couldn't just go online and sort of buy a proton pack. You had to know a guy, get a pack, buy the equipment. You couldn't 3D print stuff. You couldn't go to Hasbro.com and buy, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of time and energy went into making it. And such an important part of the last sort of 20-ish years of my life. It's always followed me around. There's a connection to it, I suppose.
Do not feel guilty. Do not feel guilty. I love it.
What did everybody else say?
Well, some people pick like a crystal that they have or some paranormal tool or some kind of historic item that they got. I considered not ever asking this question because I was like, what does this have to do with the paranormal? Like, what is this going to bring to the show? And then the more people I asked, I was like, well, they bring it. I mean, it's different for everybody. It could be related or maybe it's not related. And even if it's not related, that's a little piece of you that we learn about. And so I love it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. If people answer it truthfully, I think it's a great question. There's pressure to say things that make you look a little bit more together.
Yeah.
So if the fire department pulled up and I'm running outside with a proton pack,
I can see the picture in the paper that goes on the front page.
Man saves proton pack from fire.
Oh, man in his boxers runs out with proton pack.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those images that you don't want to see, but if I'm truthfully and honest, that's what it would be.
Hey, I love it. Honesty. I appreciate it. So you've got this book coming up. Tell us anything else that's coming up and where to find you. Again, your site is ghosttheories.com. Did I just make that up? Haunted Theories.
You did make it up. I should have chose Ghost Theories.
Hauntedtheories.com. Sorry.
Yeah, hauntedtheories.com. The best thing to do is just go to the Twitter and Facebook page, Haunted Theories. That's the best place to get all my ramblings and stuff. I post on Facebook and Twitter pretty consistently, and you can message me through there. That's the best way to get a hold of me. I do have the book coming out, hopefully haunted Medina County, Ohio. I do the research papers. If you are out there, one is called Things That Go Bump in the Literature, an Environmental Appraisal of Haunted Houses. The other one is called Environmental Gestalt Influences, Pertinent to the Study of Haunted Houses. And the other one is in Understanding Consumer Enchantment via Paranormal Tourism.
And I'll have all those in the show notes, by the way.
Yeah, so I'm a co-author on all these. The other authors on there are fabulous people who have a lot of research as well. So please follow them. I'm working on another project right now that I talked about, going to a haunted location and kind of figuring out what to do. I don't know what's happening with that, but if it turns into something like a book or something like that, then I wouldn't be too upset about that.
Excellent. Oh, man, thanks for coming back and chilling with us in the parlor and not being afraid to have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, I love coming on the show. It's always great to talk to you, and you do such an amazing job.
Thank you to the following super paranerds who support this show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Michael Henson, Daryl, Anne Marie Sullivan, Natalie N., Kim Robb, Josiel Lorenzo, Susan Davey, and Amy Park Gedicke. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are Allie of Hocus Pocus Collector, Miranda from SpookyLittleHalloween.com, Linda from ShimmeringMoons.com, Anne Rekovich from OzParatech.com, Janae Michaels from Grey House Tarot and Farm Artifacts, Chelsea from Cheers with Chelsea, Mitchell Coombs from MitchellCoombs.com, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Sarita Cockerham, Christine Rath Selhe, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Cassie Keller, Melissa Armour, Diane Rax, Nettie, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, Jim Budd, David Rubenstein, Sharon Bowles, and Norman and Linda Keller. That sound you just heard was the above and beyond. There's not even a category for your level of support fireworks display. Because I have 6 awesome listeners who support this show at the $10 level. Peggy Hagan, Glenna Becker, Steve Skinner, Kevin Gilbert, AJ Meredith, and James Wilfong. So thank you, Peggy, Glenna, Steve, Kevin, AJ, and James. And thank you, Paranerds. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of Paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.